I never thought I'd say it out loud, but my life had become so quiet I could hear the walls breathing. It wasn't always like that. There was a time when laughter bounced off the kitchen tiles, and someone was always calling my name. Now, most mornings started with the sound of the coffee maker and ended with the same untouched mug sitting cold by the sink. South Ohio had its charm. Sure, slow mornings, friendly neighbors, the same sidewalk cracks I memorized during dog walks. But inside my house, time stood still. David, my husband of 23 years, was a decent man, the kind who fixed leaky faucets without being asked and never raised his voice. But somewhere along the way, we had stopped looking at each other. We talked logistics, bills, groceries, Ellie's school schedule, but I couldn't remember the last time he asked me how I was. Not really. I'd look across the table at dinner and see a man I loved like a relative, familiar, necessary, but no longer warm. Jason had left for college 2 years ago, and Ellie, our youngest, was slipping into teenage silences. I missed noise. I missed chaos. I missed the feeling of being needed in ways beyond cooking and keeping a calendar. Lately, I caught myself dressing a little more carefully, putting on lipstick just to drop off groceries. No one noticed. Not until that week. It was early March when Jason called. He was coming home for spring break and bringing a friend. I was thrilled, not because of the guest, but because I'd get to have him home, even if just for a little while. I cleaned the house like we were expecting royalty, set the good plates out, sprinkled cinnamon in the coffee grounds like he liked when he was younger, a mother's version of a welcome party. The door opened that Friday afternoon, and in walked Jason, taller than I remembered, with a worn college hoodie and a quiet smile. Beside him stood Lena. She had honey-colored skin, sharp eyes, and an ease about her that filled the room before she even spoke. "Hi, Mrs. Bennett," she said, with a voice soft as a song. "Thank you for letting me stay." I told her to call me Julie. From the first night, she offered to help set the table, wash dishes, and even folded laundry without being asked. "I like to keep my hands busy," she said with a shrug. I noticed the way she watched people, really watched. She looked at me when I spoke, not through me like most do. She complimented my cooking, noticed my earrings, laughed at my dry humor. A stranger making me feel like a woman again, not just a mom. That night, lying in bed next to David, who was already asleep, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't sure what I was feeling, only that something had shifted. A voice in my head whispered it could be nothing. But deep down, I already knew it was something. Jason seemed relaxed that week, like being home stripped away some invisible weight from his shoulders. Lena fit in too easily, like she'd always belonged. She knew how to ask the right questions, but more than that, she listened like she cared about the answers. Most people don't. I started noticing little things, how she always sat near me at meals, how she waited for me to speak before she'd chime in. She noticed when I changed my earrings. "Those look really nice on you," she said once, as I wiped my hands on a dish towel. My heart shouldn't have fluttered, but it did. The conversations started stretching into late nights. Jason and Ellie would disappear to their rooms, and Lena and I would stay up sipping tea. She asked about my childhood, about the books I read, about my dreams when I was younger. No one had asked me that in years. I told her I used to want to be a writer. She lit up. "You still could," she said, eyes locked onto mine, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I wanted to believe her. She made a habit of lightly touching my shoulder when she passed behind me, or tucking my hair behind my ear mid-conversation like we'd known each other for years. They were soft gestures, nothing inappropriate, but they lingered longer in my mind than they should have. I didn't know what line we were approaching, only that we were slowly blurring one. And I let it happen. One afternoon, while Ellie was out with friends and Jason was napping, Lena found me in the garden pulling weeds. She crouched beside me and helped without saying a word. Then she asked quietly, "Are you happy?" I didn't know how to answer. I gave her a half smile and said, "I have a good life." She tilted her head and looked at me like she saw straight through that sentence. "That's not what I asked," she whispered. That night at dinner, things felt different. Jason looked at me more than usual, like he was trying to read something on my face. Lena stayed quiet, her eyes darting between me and my son. I wondered if he had noticed how close we'd become, how she lingered in the kitchen with me while he watched TV, how our conversations were private, warm, maybe too warm. Later, I passed by the hallway and overheard Jason talking on the phone. "I don't know, she just seems really into my mom," he said. My chest tightened, my cheeks burned. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound. I hadn't done anything. Not really. But hearing it out loud made it real. Made me guilty. That night, I couldn't look him in the eye. Still, when Lena handed me a cup of tea before bed and smiled softly, I didn't pull away. I smiled back. I knew I was in dangerous territory. But something about being seen, being wanted, made it hard to care. The night it happened, the house was quiet. Rain tapped the windows like it was trying to say something. I was curled up on the couch, a book half open in my lap. Lena sat beside me, knees pulled to her chest, sipping from a chipped mug, like she belonged there. We weren't talking. We didn't need to. The silence between us had grown familiar, almost intimate. When she looked at me, there was no shyness anymore. Just something patient, waiting. I should have stood up. I should have walked away. But I didn't. She reached over, gently took the book from my hands, and closed it. "You never finish the ones that mean something," she said. Then her hand stayed there, resting lightly on mine. Her thumb moved, once slow, and I felt the warmth crawl up my arm and settle in my throat. I didn't move. I let her stay there, her fingers tracing my skin like I was something delicate. "You deserve to be loved properly," she said. And just like that, a line I didn't even realize we'd been tiptoeing around vanished. I didn't kiss her. She didn't kiss me. But in every other way, something crossed. She laid her head on my shoulder, and I let mine rest against hers. It wasn't physical. It was worse. It was emotional, deep, and dangerous. For a moment, I forgot I was someone's wife, someone's mother. I was just a woman who'd been lonely for far too long, finally feeling alive. I heard Jason before I saw him. A sharp breath, a shift in the hallway floor. I looked up, and there he was, frozen, his face unreadable. His eyes flicked from Lena to me, then back again. He didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away. That silence shattered more than any scream ever could. Lena sat up quickly. "I didn't mean," she started, but I raised a hand. "It's okay," I said, though nothing about it was. The next day, Jason avoided me completely. He barely spoke at breakfast, wouldn't meet my eyes. Lena stayed in the guest room most of the day. I washed dishes I didn't need to wash, wiped down clean counters. My hands needed something to do because my mind wouldn't stop racing. I had never cheated on my husband, not physically. But what happened on that couch? That was something else entirely. I had shared parts of myself that belonged to someone else, or maybe parts that hadn't belonged to anyone in years. I wanted to talk to Jason, to explain. But how do you explain something you don't fully understand yourself? That I hadn't planned it, that I hadn't felt this kind of connection in decades, that for one fragile moment I forgot who I was supposed to be and remembered who I used to be? That night I sat alone. No Lena, no David, no kids, just me and my thoughts. And for the first time, I couldn't hide from what I'd done. Not in my heart, not in my son's eyes. Jason didn't speak to me for 2 days. When he finally did, his voice was low, measured, and cut sharper than he probably meant. I brought her here because I trusted you, he said, not just as my mom, but as someone who wouldn't blur lines. I stood there, mouth dry, unable to defend myself, because the truth was, I had, not with my body, but with something more fragile. I'd let someone see a version of me I'd locked away long ago. And now my son saw it too, and he didn't like what it looked like. Lena left that afternoon. No long goodbye, no final words, just a quiet bag packed and a cab waiting outside. She looked at me before closing the door. I never meant to cause harm, she said. I nodded but didn't say anything. There wasn't anything left that could change what had already cracked. The silence after she left was loud. Jason didn't join us for dinner. David didn't ask why. I kept moving like the days expected it from me. Cooked breakfast, no one ate. Folded laundry, no one wore. On the third night, I sat with David and told him everything, not in dramatic detail, but in the truth that mattered. That I had been lonely, that I had felt invisible, that I hadn't sought it out, but I hadn't stopped it either. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't walk away. He just looked at me for a long time and said, "Then let's start seeing each other again." That was the first real thing we'd said to each other in months. We didn't magically fix what was broken. We didn't fall back in love overnight, but we began to talk, really talk, about who we were and who we'd become and what we still wanted, if anything, to salvage. I started therapy, began journaling, forced myself to sit with the guilt and learn from it, not bury it. I missed Jason, even though he was still in the house. Eventually, he softened. One afternoon, he left a note on the kitchen table that said, "I'm still disappointed, but I get it." It broke my heart and gave me hope at the same time. I haven't seen Lena since. I don't know where she is, and maybe that's for the best. She didn't break my family. I did that in small pieces over years of silence and neglect, some mine, some not. But she made me see something I hadn't faced in a long time, the version of myself that wanted to be alive again. Not just useful, not just dependable, but real. Now, I move slower. I listen more. I speak when something feels off, instead of letting it settle and sour. I don't know if David and I will ever be what we were, but at least we're not pretending anymore. When Jason walked into that room and saw me, he thought I had crossed a line. But the truth is, I had stepped over it long before. I just hadn't realized it until someone else finally saw me standing there.